You know, he's a figure so huge, he has his own holiday. But that monument, that legacy, is starting to crack under the immense weight of historical reevaluation. Today, we're going to deconstruct the story of a man who's really less of a person and more of a symbol, Christopher Columbus.
Look, we live in an era where history is constantly being revisited. We're always re-examining old stories as new evidence and, just as importantly, new perspectives come to light. And wow, few stories are as hotly contested as the man who sailed the ocean blue in 1492. So how did one guy become both a celebrated hero and a condemned villain? Let's get into it.
All right, first, let's go back to the story I'm guessing a lot of us were taught in school. Columbus, the brave, the visionary navigator. This is the epic tale, right? A man with just 3 small ships daring to sail into what was basically the great unknown, forever linking 2 halves of the world. This narrative, it really celebrates not just his raw courage, but the idea that he kicked off a whole new era of global interaction, all driven by the beliefs of his time.
Now, one of the most significant, world-altering consequences of his voyages was something we now call the Columbian Exchange. And listen, this wasn't just about trading trinkets. This was a biological and cultural revolution that literally reshaped the entire planet.
I mean, just think about it. Can you imagine Italian food without tomatoes? Or Ireland without potatoes? Or Texas without cattle? This exchange completely transformed what people ate and how economies worked across the globe. New crops from the Americas fuel the population boom in Europe, while horses from Europe completely revolutionized life for indigenous peoples on the American plains. The world we know today was fundamentally born from this moment.
Now, supporters of this hero narrative will often argue that we simply can't judge a 15th century man by our 21st century ethics. To do that is to fall into a trap called presentism, basically yanking a historical figure out of their own time and unfairly applying our modern moral code to their actions. But of course, the story doesn't end with navigation and potatoes. What actually happened when Columbus and his men made landfall? Well, this is where that heroic tale really starts to come apart at the seams.
And there you have it. These are Columbus's own words, straight from his logbook. From the very first moment of contact, the mission was rooted in force and extraction, not in peaceful discovery. This one sentence really set the stage for everything that came next.
The historical record, including these chilling accounts from eyewitnesses like the priest Bartolomé de las Casas, paints an absolutely horrifying picture. This wasn't a few bad apples or isolated incidents. It was a system of enslavement and brutality, all in this relentless, obsessive pursuit of gold. This became the blueprint for a colonial model that would prove to be absolutely devastating.
So this brings us to this staggering, almost unimaginable number. This represents the estimated drop in the indigenous population in the Americas within just the first 150 years of European contact. I mean, it's a demographic collapse on a scale that is unlike almost anything else in human history. Okay, now, to be clear, the vast majority of these deaths were caused by old world diseases like smallpox. The native peoples just had no immunity. But, and this is a huge but, we cannot forget that systematic violence, slavery, and forced labor were also devastating and very deliberate factors in this collapse. They weren't an accident.
This catastrophic series of events, it isn't just a sad chapter in a history book. Its consequences are a living, breathing reality for indigenous communities today.
So how can the trauma of the past still be felt so strongly today? Well, psychologists have a model for this called historic trauma transmission. It's this idea that the immense suffering of one generation doesn't just vanish. It gets passed down, creating these wounds that echo through families and communities for centuries.
And this isn't some abstract theory. It shows up in very real, measurable ways. Higher rates of depression and suicide, struggles with substance abuse, and the breakdown of social structures within indigenous communities, all of which can be traced directly back to this foundational trauma.
To kind of wrap your head around how this works, listen to this powerful account from a psychologist's patient. This person never set foot in a concentration camp, but their mother did, and yet they experienced her trauma in their own dreams. It is just a haunting reminder of how deep these wounds can run and how they can be passed from one generation to the next.
So where does all this leave us? The simple hero or villain label, it just doesn't work, does it? Maybe a better way to see Columbus is not as some uniquely evil figure, but as the first domino in a long chain reaction. The collision of these two worlds might have been inevitable because of technology, but the way it actually happened was profoundly, humanly devastating. This incredibly complex legacy brings us right to a very modern debate. How should we, here in the 21st century, remember this past?
And here, we really have to make a crucial distinction between two words, history and commemoration. History is the study of what happened, all of it, the good, the bad, the complicated. Commemoration, though, that's a choice. That's about which people and events we decide to lift up as symbols of the values we want to represent right now, today.
And this is really the heart of the modern debate. The movement to replace Columbus Day isn't about trying to erase history or pretend he didn't exist. It's about reevaluating who we choose to put on a pedestal. It's a conversation about what our public holidays should stand for, a legacy of conquest or a commitment to resilience, justice, and the recognition of all people.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If the symbols we choose to celebrate are a mirror reflecting our society's values, what story do we want that mirror to be telling about us today?
Thank you for watching. If you found this explainer valuable and you want more deep dives into complex topics just like this one, please be sure to like and subscribe.